mikrofonlar size uzatıldığında arkadaşlar, mikrofonlardan Inigo ve Maria sizin sesinizi duyabiliyor olacaklar. Bu senelik biz Skype üzerinden bağlandık. Hologram siparişi yetişmediği için. Biliyorsunuz Türkiye bu konuda çok ileri bir ülke. Gelecek sene de hologramla inşallah bağlamayı düşünüyoruz. Arzu bu konuda çalışmaları yürütüyor zaten. Tekrar hepinize hoş geldiniz diyorum. Evet, Inigo'ya bağlanabiliriz.
Okay.
Inigo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, how are you, Maria?
How are you?
Yeah. We are ready for you. Nearly we have 50 participants.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Okay, it's your turn.
Okay, so good afternoon, Merhaba Turkey, Merhaba TEGEP conference. I hope you're having a great conference. I know it's the second day. It's 8 o'clock here in Washington, D.C., so we're connecting. Thanks to the technology, the new technologies in the world, we can be talking and we're in the other side of the world. So I have here with me, I'm Senior Regional Manager for ATD, for the International Department of ATD. And I'm here with Maria Hall, she's Research Manager for the ATD Research Department. And we're very happy to be here with you guys. Unfortunately, we cannot be in person with you in Istanbul right now. But we're actually going to try to present for you some our latest research, which is the global trends in talent development. It's a project we developed this summer. Maria was in charge of the project. Our international department collaborated with several associations and TEGEP to actually gather data from all of you. We're going to present you the results of the data, and we'll ask you questions. So just because we're on the other side doesn't mean we're going to make people tell you the data.
Yes. Thank you, Inigo.
Yep.
Okay.
So, as Inigo mentioned, we're from ATD, the Association for Talent Development. I won't go through, spend a lot of time on this, but we have about 40,000 members from 120 countries. And I represent ATD Research, and I want to share with you some of our research reports and resources that are available to everyone. So, if you go to the slide about ATD Research, you'll see that there's a Twitter feed, ATD Research. It's free for everyone, and you can follow us there. And we post news, not just from our own research on trends in the talent development industry, but we also post news articles that are very reputable from other sources on trends and news in the industry. So it's a great resource to follow, and it's free. I also encourage you, if you have any questions for me on trends, on metrics, to email me, research@td.org. So the next slide, please. And so here are some of the research topics we've studied in the last year, really. So those of you who are members know that the State of the Industry report, that is coming out soon. The new one will be out probably around the end of this month, so keep an eye out for that. That's free to all of our ATD members. The report that we'll speak about today is called Global Trends in Talent Development, and that looks comparatively at different regions around the world and how their talent development practices, spending, the hours they spend per employee are different from region to region. We've also published on a few of the topics. Aligning for Success is on aligning your talent development or your learning function with your business leaders' goals. Leaders as Teachers is on programs for leadership that use your leaders, so your managers and senior leaders, to teach other employees. Those of you who have branched into the area of mobile learning, which is learning through smartphones and tablets, may be interested in the mobile landscape. And we also have a report on instructional design and trends in that field particularly. So the next slide, please. So we won't go too much into the ATD resources. We know that you are aware of our conferences, education, certification, our publications research. I do want to mention the awards. We had our best awards last week, which recognized the best, really the best companies in the world and their practices in talent development that are encouraging a culture of learning.
Actually, I don't know if we have anybody in the audience from Turkcell, anybody from Yapı or anybody from Turkey's Economic Plan, TED. If you're there, you have to congratulate yourself, because we did have 3 companies this year out of 30 who were from Turkey. You guys have to be really proud, because throughout Europe, Turkey has the largest amount of award winners in the industry. So all the top banks have won awards, people like Technosa, some of the big organizations have won awards with us. So you actually, that is a lot about, that says a lot about Turkey and how the practices in child development are developed, because that means you guys are investing in your people, developing your people, and you have excellent practices that you can learn from.
Slide, please.
So actually, I'll explain, and some of you may know about it, but well, I will ask you a question. How many of you are members of TEGEP, and how many of you are members of TEGEP and HED? You can raise your hand, so I can see it a little bit.
I'm counting Inigo.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Okay, so some of you are members of both. I totally encourage you to become a member of a professional association like TEGEP, like us, because it's your way to develop yourself. And once you develop yourself, you can develop your people much better. So one of the things that we implemented 2 years ago is we moved to a model of chunking, cutting the content that we have available, all the expertise from gurus, from subject matter experts, into different communities of practice. So this is a new model that is happening in all other industries too, which is like, how many of you, for example, work with senior leaders, work with senior executives, developing or helping? You see, I'm seeing, raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
5. Okay. How many? Okay. So how many of you work in sales enablement, in training of sales, developing sales?
Sales enablement.
Okay, sales enablement. For example,
5 Inigo.
Human capital, for example. Capital? No? Okay, so each one of you, if you work with senior leaders, you want to benchmark, you want to hang out, you want to learn from other colleagues who have the same interest, the same areas of interest. That is the whole idea of the concept of communities of practice. So in each community, in our case, for example, our director of international is the director, the manager for the global HRD, Global Human Resources Development Community of Practice. What do we do in that community? Well, we talked about how many of you, for example, work for, of course, you all work for a Turkish company, but how many of you work for Turkish companies who have operations outside of Turkey?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
9 companies out of 50. Okay, awesome. So you are developing people not only in Turkey, but maybe in China, maybe in Europe, in other parts of Europe, in Africa, in the US. You need to know what are the best practices and the differences in culture in that, to develop that people. So that's a little bit what the global HRD community of practice will do. So the idea is to chunk the content into the different communities. As I was telling you, next slide, the global HRD community, basically we talk about, thought leaders around the world, how we do webcasts, we do books, we actually do articles in the magazine, and we access to different materials in different languages. We don't have, unfortunately, a lot of materials yet in Turkish. But the idea is that you network with other professionals from your community of interest to develop yourself better. That's a little bit the idea. Next slide.
So I'm going to speak a little bit about our research projects on trends around the world. First off, I just want to thank TEGEP as well as the other organizations that help us distribute the survey to learning leaders around the world. So thank you very much, and thank you if any of you took the survey. So let's talk about trends. The project, in the summer of 2015, we surveyed people working in talent development all around the globe, and we had 1,373 different organizations submit their data. So these are all individual, each one is a different organization, not just a different person. And we asked them about a number of things. We wanted to know what types of challenges they faced, what their goals were for the next year. And we also wanted to know how much they spent on talent development. So what is your company's total budget for training and development for everyone? And we also wanted to know how many talent development employees companies had. So for a large company with 5 to 10,000 people, how many staff are they hiring to work in the talent development function? And that would include trainers, CLOs, instructional designers, and so on and so forth. And we also wanted to know what the learning experience is like everywhere. So if I were an average employee at a company in a certain region of the world, how many hours per year would I spend getting formal training? And so formal training is not on-the-job training. Formal training is either in a classroom or in front of e-learning or in front of a mobile learning platform. So that's formal learning. So how much formal learning would I get? What types of content are emphasized? For example, am I getting leadership development? Am I getting executive training? Am I getting, people skills like teamwork? Or am I getting professional skills such as, accounting skills or medical skills? And then finally, how is it being delivered to me? Am I getting it in an e-learning platform? Am I linked up to a virtual classroom online? Am I sitting in front of the instructor in a real live classroom? So we really wanted to know these things, and we know that these things are going to vary from country to country. So next slide, please. And so, why are we looking at these world regions? Well, each region has very unique factors, such as your economy, your educational system, your government system, that shape how talent development is conducted. For example, in some countries, we know the cost of living is lower than in others. So we assume from there that the budget for talent development for the same thing might be lower because the cost of certain services are going to be less in one country. And also the educational systems make a big difference. In some countries, there's more formal professional education that people receive perhaps through the university system or the school system before they enter the workforce, while in other countries, people are trained, by their employers. And so, if we split up the data by regions, you can compare your practices to other people in your region of the world. And then if you are part of a global organization, I noticed many of you raised your hands, we said your operations in many parts of the world, you can tailor your offering in each region to that region's unique conditions. So you can split up your budget between regions, you can plan the types of technology you're using based on what's available in those regions. You can assess whether or not there's vendors in each region. We'll see later that the vendor market is very different in each region for your outsourced activities. Next slide, please.
Organization by size.
Yep. Oh, by size, no, please.
Oh, those size. So, organization by size. Why does this matter so much? Because obviously, bigger organizations are going to have more budget for spending, right? But at the same time, there's economies of scale. So your bigger organization can spread out the cost of a class across more people, and therefore it costs less per employee. Also, small organizations that you see on the left, those fewer than 500 employees, we found that they rely much more on vendors because, for example, a small company may not have the resources internally to develop their own for example, to develop their own e-learning model. So they might buy that from a vendor versus large companies tend to do more internally.
Actually, let's survey a little bit. How many of you belong to an organization with more than 10,000 employees?
Okay.
And you said that's one. Okay. Between 500 and 10,000? 15. Between 500 and 10,000? Less 100 employees? Okay.
So most of you are from that large group. So today, when I speak to Med Trends, we're going to focus on that large group. And I'll point out that Turkey is part of Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, which is that light blue bar, the second one in each group. So you see that actually in your region, only about 12% are large organizations are large, which makes sense. They employ more people, but because the way we did our survey is that one response is one company, remember, that they're going to be a smaller number. And you can see, so the next slide, please. Organizations by industry. Again, this matters so much. We've seen in our research that, for example, manufacturing firms will have a lower per employee cost to deliver training than, say, a software company, because the software company, the knowledge gets outdated so quickly. More of it has to be very specific training that can't be just kind of purchased off the shelf. So it might have to be customized if you're teaching people how to use a certain software product. It might be more costly because it's more technology. And then some other industries we see that have high costs tend to be management consulting tends to have fairly high costs. Again, they have very specialized knowledge. People often work in small teams, so they can't train too many people at a time.
Or even some of you, for example, let's know a little bit your industry. So how many of you work with pharmaceutical companies? Anybody in the pharmaceutical industry? Nobody. How many of you work for industrial companies, manufacturing? Factory, okay. Finance, any banks? Okay, quite a few. Finance. Yep, services, any kind of services, consulting. Okay. So that's a little bit, sometimes the industries in the type of talent development programs, it's influenced by, if I'm from a bank, you have to go through a lot of training. Half of your training, it might be compliant, with new regulations of the European Union or the world regulations. So pharmaceuticals, the same thing. Industrial companies, more engineering processes. So half of your budget is going to go towards that type of training.
And you can see, again, if you look at that blue bar for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, you can see that other services and education are the largest groups, followed by finance, and then 8% in manufacturing. And you'll notice there's some differences we see between regions, which is why we want to separate out the region. You'll see that if you look at manufacturing, that dark blue bar is the Asia Pacific region, and that so many of their companies are in manufacturing, and that's because China's the biggest manufacturing economy in the world. So they have very different, so you'll see that their expenses tend to be lower, because in manufacturing you can train, it's often you train thousands of workers at once on how to use a piece of machinery, for example, versus in something like management consulting, you're bringing in a small team and you may be training them on a very specific project or client.
Look at the North America, for example. So North America is more of a healthcare industry. Actually, of the sample. Remember, this is a sample of 1,300 companies. Now, before we go to the next slide, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you'll show the slide. So let me ask you a question, an interesting question, trending topics. What's important for you in talent development right now? So see if you can share a little bit. What's important? What's in your mind in talent development? What's your concern right now? Anybody can share? No?
They don't share because it's their secret, Inigo.
Oh, okay, they don't want to share. Okay, so let me share some information. Most influential trending topics. Well, what are people in talent development thinking of, or what's important for them? Number one reason, if you look across the board in every region, is how do we link learning to performance? How do we connect, I'm putting together this talent development program, and how, at the end of the day, what matters is the performance of that people, the performance of that team. So that's the number one trend all over, in Asia, in Europe, in Latin America, in North America. The second one, in two of the regions in Europe, Middle East and Africa, and in Latin America, is frontline leadership. One of the main concerns of large companies, and I'm sure you share that with us in Turkey, is how do we develop these new leaders, this pipeline of leaders who are going to be the future leaders of the company. One of the big trends that we're experiencing is how do we retain the knowledge. So we have this generation, baby boomers, and older generations who are leaving the workplace, they're retiring in the next 5 years. How are we going to keep that knowledge that is leaving the organization, right? That's another big trend that is important. If you look at Europe, informal learning, how do we develop, back to what Maria was saying, the formal training, you're going to see it on the few slides, it's still very important, but one thing that is happening in the organization is a lot of learning happens on the workplace, and it's in a very informal way. So I'm learning from my peers, I'm learning from my boss. With these new technologies, through social learning, we're learning in a very informal way. That's learning also, right? Okay, next slide. So what are the challenges? What are your challenges in Turkey right now?
We have 10 more minutes, Inigo. 10 more minutes. We have 10 more minutes.
Okay. So your challenges, basically, one of the top challenges in Europe is how do we build a culture within the organization that supports talent development? How do we engage our organization into moving into an organization of being innovative, provoking learning constantly? One of the top things in the organization is how do we engage the senior level how do we get their buy-in? If we have a senior level that is convinced of the commitment to develop our people, that organization is going to thrive, most probably. Yeah, go ahead. So we'll just remind you, let me go back 1 second to the previous slide, challenges. I just want to remind you that Maria is going to produce a new report on how do we build a culture of learning in Q1 of 2016. So coming out very soon. Stay tuned on that. We're also focusing in very different topics. So let's talk about staff.
So let's talk about staff size. So this is the median. So we found no matter where you are in the world, company size is obviously the biggest factor. And once you broke companies down into those size groups, there's no difference from region to region really in how many talent development staff were employed. So you can see here, I'll focus on the large and medium because that is what most of you indicated that you work in those size organizations. For medium-sized organizations, the median company, the typical company had 5 full-time talent development staff, and for large companies it was 25, but there's a lot of variation. And to benchmark this metric for you, other ATD studies, we have found that a benchmark is around 1 learning staff per 400 employees. We did a study last year, it was 1 to 419. So it's about 1 to every 400 employees. So you'll have 1 talent development staff.
I would ask them, let's do a little bit of survey to see yourself, to compare yourself with what the study is saying. So how many of you belong to, you said about 9, 10, 12 people work for organizations more than 10,000. How many people do you have for L&D, for talent development as a staff per employee? Do you know that figure, more or less? There?
Nobody.
Nobody, that's fine. Running short on time, let's talk a little bit about budgets, which is very important. Obviously, for these small organizations, you can see that the light blue bar for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, that almost 2/3 of them are under $50,000 a year in talent development budgets, and that includes the talent development staff salaries, travel costs, and the cost of developing and deploying all these trainings. You can see at the very bottom, there's 2% of very small companies that actually have budgets of over $1 million. So we'll look next at the large and medium-sized organizations and spend more time on those because that is where most of you work. So next slide, please. So for the medium-sized organizations, we see a lot of differences between regions because as you can see, in the Asia-Pacific region, they have more manufacturing firms which have lower costs. And you can see that about a third of their companies have that are medium-sized, so 400 to 10,000 employees have under a budget of under $50,000. So now let's turn to your region, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. You can see that 37% of medium-sized organizations have a budget of over $1 million a year for talent development, and that's $1 million US. And another 42% fall in $100,000 to $1 million. So the vast majority of them are over $100,000, and most are actually over $500,000. Next slide, please.
Large organizations, 5 more minutes.
Yes, so let's look at the large organizations and spend some more time on this. So this actually, we didn't break it down by region because we wanted to have a larger sample. But you can see that 23% of large organizations have annual budgets of over $10 million. And that really is your very large multinational corporations. Many of those, most of those actually, had had more than 20,000 employees. But another thing you see here is that there's a huge amount of variation. You'll see that, a third of them actually have budgets below $500,000 on the other end. And really, in the middle is that range of is right around $1 million. So you'll see that 51% have over $1 million and about 49% under $1 million. So you'll see that that's really kind of the midpoint. And next slide, please. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this area of outsourcing. So what's an outsourced cost? An outsourced cost is when you go to a vendor to either develop training for you, or you go to a vendor and they actually conduct a class for you. Now, as we saw before, the smaller organizations do tend to outsource a little more because a lot of them simply just don't have someone on staff, for example, to build the e-learning platform or to kind of or maybe to deliver a class on a topic that's very specific. So you'll see here about 36% of your costs in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa go to outsourced activities. Other studies we've seen have found around 30%. You'll see North America is a little lower at 29%. And the next slide, please. So I do want to spend a little bit of time on this slide because it's very interesting. So there's not a big difference between regions on how many hours of training employees get. Now, this doesn't look at the quality of the training, just how many hours you get. But you'll see that Europe, the Middle East, Africa is actually the highest at around 37 hours a year. So other studies we've done have found around 33 hours a year. And in this study, the average worldwide was 34 for the whole world. So you'll see that Europe and Middle East Africa is a little higher than the rest of the world, but everyone is above 30 and below 40. So next slide, please. And I do want to talk a little about how that training is being delivered to people. So the traditional live classroom where you are sitting in front of an instructor in a classroom is still how most training hours are delivered all around the world. As you can see, 3% of hours in Europe and Middle East and Africa are delivered that way. And we've actually done the State of the Industry report every year, which looks worldwide. And we've never found, every single year, it's still above half of hours are delivered in a traditional classroom. About 5 years ago, it was closer to 60%, so it's come down a little bit, but you'll see that it's still the dominant method. And I'm sure most of you still rely heavily on that method to deliver much of your training. And then if you look at technology-based and blended methods, technology-based methods are about 20%, and then that blended, and that's e-learning or virtual classrooms, and then that blended approach is about 23%, and that's those cases where, and I'm sure many of you have courses like this, where it's half where you bring a laptop and you're following along, but you're in a classroom and there's an instructor at the front of the classroom. So, and finally, one more slide.
So let's talk about content.
Content, yeah.
What's important for the in terms of content? What is the content that we see in the survey? So the survey is telling us that still the main content areas is developing interpersonal skills. So what are for us interpersonal skills? So basically, interpersonal skills is how are we able to build trust? How are we able to communicate effectively? How are we able to work in teams? Are we able to influence stakeholders, the decision makers in the organization? Are we able to network and to partner, to create partnerships inside the organization and outside the organization? How are we able to demonstrate that we are emotional intelligent? These are the main areas of development. The second one in Europe, if you look at it, is managerial and supervisory skills. So we still have to train our managers and our supervisors to be a better manager and a better supervisor.
And this ties into that area of frontline leadership that we were talking about earlier. One thing that really struck us is that in every region, when we talk to people on phone about some of their concerns, one of them was that their frontline leaders, so they're kind of early stage managers or first line managers that actually see a lot of day-to-day managing work. One of the issues that people raised were that I have these frontline leaders that, they became managers. These are good at their jobs, like programming a computer, or they're good at banking, or they're good at selling something in sales, right? But they don't have any managerial skills, so they struggle when they have to lead a team. And it's particularly true with, oftentimes there's people who are high performers, and they struggle because they have to manage people who may not also be high performers. So.
Yeah, especially in industrial companies, you have a great engineer who becomes a manager, and he's not a good manager, but he might be a great engineer. So one thing has nothing to do with the other. That's a little bit the main important content areas that we see in the survey, and some of the companies, some of you who were part of the survey, reply. So to finalize, we totally invite you to next slide to get the full report. If you're members of ATD, you can actually get the white paper.
Yeah, you can get a white paper version actually for free if you're a member of ATD. So you just go to that website, and if you're logged into your account, you'll be able to click on the white paper and it'll download for free.
Right. So we pass it on to you to talk a little bit about, well, I don't know if you want to open the questions first, and then you talk about the delegation. Hakan?
Inigo, I think we will skip the question and answer part because our time is up and we have another parallel session here. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And do you see the applause here? Can you see it? Thank you very much. We love you.
Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, remember you can actually write us at research@td.org, or you can write us at international@td.org. We're very welcome to answer any questions that you have, any concerns. I totally invite you and invite TEGEP, of course, to come to Denver next year. It's May 22nd to the 25th in Denver, Colorado. It's a great city, a lot of hiking for those of you who like the mountains. And we'll have a lot of learning. We actually started to announce yesterday the people who were selected to present at the conference. We have more than 350 sessions next year in 25 concurrent sessions, like the ones that you're having at the conference today. I hope you guys have a great conference. I don't know. That's a second letter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inigo. Thank you, Maria. And thanks for sharing the full report with our participants, and I will share your contact information with them.
Please.
See you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a great conference.
Thank you. Evet arkadaşlar, son olarak bir dakikanızı rica edeceğim. TEGEP Türk Delegasyonu hakkında da bilgi vermek istiyorum. Son 3 senedir TEGEP Türk Delegasyonu'nu organize ediyor ve birlikte gidiyoruz. Resimde gördüğünüz delegasyon katılımcısı olan arkadaşlar. Her sene bir takım formalarımızı giyiyoruz ve bu seneki Denver'da olacak. 22 ila 25. Sunumu açabilir miyiz? Sunumu açabilir miyiz? Sunumu açabilir miyiz? 22 ila 25 Mayıs tarihleri arasında olacak. TEGEP olarak biz size neler sağlıyoruz? Onun da cevabını vereyim arkadaşlar. Vize kolaylığı sağlıyoruz. Amerika'dan davet mektubu alıyoruz ATD'den. O davet mektubuyla Amerikan konsolosluğuna gittiğinizde vize almanız daha kolay oluyor. Lütfen en az bir ay öncesinden bize haber verin. İkincisi, eğer aynı uçakla gidersek Türk Hava Yolları'ndan indirim alma imkanımız var. Genelde farklı uçaklarla gitmeyi insanlar tercih edebiliyorlar. Öncesinden gideyim ya da birkaç gün sonra geleyim diyebiliyorlar. Üçüncüsü, oteller konusunda indirim sağlıyoruz. Bu konuda da ATD'nin bir organizasyonu var. Normalde siz Booking.com, TripAdvisor.com gibi siteler üzerinden organizasyon yapabilirsiniz, rezervasyon yapabilirsiniz. Ama ATD'nin fiyatları genelde daha iyi oluyor çünkü toplu olarak rezervasyon yapıyoruz. Burada da 14 Mayıs bizim deadline'ımız. Aynı zamanda oraya gittiğimizde Türk delegasyonu olarak delegasyon yemeği düzenliyoruz mutlaka. Networking etkinlikleri yapıyoruz. Artı outlet alışverişi oluyor. Genelde araç kiralayanlar oluyor ya da toplu olarak gidenler oluyor. Hani Türk'ü her yerde oluyor, öyle söyleyeyim. Peki neden biz delegasyonla katılalım, bireysel olarak katılmayalım sorusunun cevabı. Arkadaşlar çok basit bir cevap vereceğim. Delegasyon olarak katılırsanız $1250, şu anki katılım bedeli $325'dan başlıyor, $1875'a kadar çıkıyor. Dolayısıyla delegasyonla katılırsanız en az $75, maksimum $625 nakit olarak karınız olur. Bir form gönderiyoruz size. Bu formu kime göndereceğinizi de söyleyeyim. Bizim de delegasyon kodumuz var. 2016-02-2006 bu yılki kodumuz. Bu kodla ATD'den store'a girip, oradaki mağazaya girip kendi sepetinize, kongreye eklerseniz, eğer katılmak isterseniz bu kodla girdiğinizde otomatik olarak indirim size tanımlanacaktır. Gerçek Hanım var, bizim genel sekreterimiz Gerçek Çavuşoğlu. Onunla da paylaşırsanız bilgilerinizi biz bunu iletiyoruz ve ATD bize bu konuda yardımcı oluyor. İletişim bilgilerini de Maria ve Inigo'ya ulaşmak isterseniz sizlere vermiş olayım. Ben tekrar katılımınız için hepinize çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ayaklarınıza sağlık. Hoşçakalın arkadaşlar.